Welcome back to Twisted River. It's been a week or so since I posted because when I loaded up my save a week ago, it crashed and there was some issue with the experimental branch of the map generator for Foundation. So the devs just issued a patch a couple of days ago to fix it, and now my save loads again. So I'm able to get into my save. And what I wanted to do for this video was to, instead of watching me painfully build the village step by step, I wanted to do a series of check-ins at different points in the village development so that you can see how I'm using my mod pack to develop the village, and we'll go from there. So at the moment, I'm in month 18. I have 116 people. I think when I left off the last village, or the last video, I probably had 60 people. So what I've done since then, I've expanded, obviously, the manor. So if we look at the manor now and turn on the UI, we see that we have the prison, the steward. So a steward is part of the authority mod. So if I go in here to labor, I've unlocked the manor household. And there are different jobs that can provide authority. The steward is a simple one, probably the simplest one, because the servants of the steward gather stone and planks to maintain the manor. And from that they generate construction materials, and the steward himself uses the construction materials to generate authority. So if I go in here and look at the sub-building, I have a shed, which is where the servants work gathering the materials, and then the steward's chamber itself where he converts those materials into authority. To get the steward, I need a commoner, and so I've been preparing different parts of what I need to do the commoner. So first I built a tavern. So we filled public house, and there are a number of vanilla quests which will exchange planks and polished stones and some other things for beer. So I got 100 beer without actually producing any myself from those quests. So I have 100 beer ready, and I have my tavern built. I have the service counter selling beer, a public lounge, and then I also added some living quarters because I wanted people to be able to live in this village center area, and I have room for 20 people living in this little block here. I started a wheat industry, although there's some issues with the map generator, and what it does is sometimes this wheat doesn't appear, but it seems to be growing anyway, and it appears if you reload the game. But anyway, this wheat farm is generating wheat, and I'm starting to store up that wheat in preparation for a beer industry. I probably have more vegetables than I had before. I have an absolute load of fish. So this lake is producing tons of fish. You can see that I've stored up a lot of that fish, and I'm even full in my fishing huts. So creating more and more storage areas so that I can store more and more food in preparation for the following winter. I think this next winter will be absolutely easy because I've got so much fish and I've got such a huge supply of it. My houses have expanded up the hill a bit. I have some vegetable farms. So I started with these smaller plots, which are not as efficient, although they don't take up very much space. But then I built 2 new farms on the hill and have started to clear the trees up here, and that's providing lots of vegetables, which you can see here. I have a number of satellite markets operating. So over by the chickens, I have a couple of carts selling food. I have fuel carts. If I right click here, I have a fuel cart here, here, and here. And my next plan is to start expanding markets and housing into this area. If I look at my territory boundaries at the moment, I have still some unused territory here, and I also have some underutilized territory here. So the plan would be to start utilizing that territory more appropriately, and then start to buy this territory up on the hill so that I can build perhaps a monastery, and this territory up on this hill so that I can expand my lumber production. Because as I expand the density of the village, the lumber production, which is based in the village itself, is not going to be as efficient because there's not as much space to grow trees. So I'm going to start removing some of these industries and moving them out to the periphery of the village. Another thing that you need for commoners is entertainment. So I've already started building a street performers tent. This is going to be a fortune teller, which is, if you look, it's the middle tent, which produces, I think, a maximum of 10 authority, which is a good starting ground. This takes a lot of cloth, which I'm not producing, So it's taking a while to build that tent because I'm having to trade for cloth and use up my gold supply in that way. If I look at my trading, I am still trading pottery and iron, which I'm collecting from rubbish, and then I'm buying the cloth. And I'm also buying a small amount of tools just to top up the number of tools. If we look at the trade route, I'm close to being able to upgrade the trade route, and that's really important because when you upgrade the trade route, you suddenly massively increase your ability to both import and export, and that will drastically increase the amount of gold that I'm able to accumulate. And using that gold, then I will be able to unlock the other trade routes, which is important because then I'll be able to start selling my fish, and I'll also be able to use the golds to unlock new things, especially in the common path, which are currently blocked. Once you open that trade route and you start to trade higher items, your also prosperity is going to go way up because the wealth that you accumulate is going to increase a lot, and the amount of commerce is going to increase as well. So at 116 people, I'm ready to promote my first commoners. I'm ready then to start to accumulate some authority, which I will then use to acquire the first external territories. But thankfully, I really haven't needed territory up to this point, so I'm not feeling super crowded. But one thing that I will do to start to densify the city is to increase the amount of dense housing in here. So you can see I've still got all serf houses because I haven't got any commoners. What I can do is I'll start to build manual houses along here, and I'll start to increase the living quarters in some of my manor houses. Another thing that I'll need to do at some point is to expand the religious offerings. At the moment, I have the church, which has only 90 spaces, and then I have some outlying sacred springs from the pagan worship mod, which provide 15 spaces. So that's how I'm able to accommodate everyone so far. I have a sacred spring also in the manor. But I will need to expand this church significantly, which means probably relocating some of the houses and densifying the main housing district. And then, of course, I do plan on including and building a new monument up here, probably a monastery, because I do want to start to get some of that clergy splendor going. Then this would be a great site for either a monastery or a castle. So I'm thinking at this point that it's going to be a monastery. Okay, so that's my check-in at 116 people. In just a moment, then, after I've played a few more hours, I will check in and we'll see how I'm doing later on. All right, so 7 months have passed in-game. It's now month 25, and I have, at the moment, 150 villagers. And you can see already that the village is starting to change its nature a little bit. So first off, I have densified the main area. I added my new housing mod, which is called the House Expansion Set. And using those placeable houses, I've been able to remove some of the houses that were just along here in the main market area. And I've placed some new high-density commoner/citizen houses. And I have to say, I really like the way that this mod has turned out. I tried to model these houses on the vanilla houses, so they have the same footprint and kind of same overall shape and size. But there's more color varieties. As you can see, like here's a red house. I also added some half-hipped roofs. And I also added my own version of the low-density commoner housing here. So this is a vanilla house, and these are my modded houses. So you can see I tried to make them have the same roof structure and overall proportions in order for it all to blend well together. There are a couple of other housing mods. My favorite housing mod is Vanioville, or Residential Area, by Arthas, and that's a mod I used for a long time. But those houses are very different from each other. Each house is very unique, which is fun when you're building a city, but I always wanted my houses to be a little more, to conform a little bit more with the vanilla style, so that's why I made my own housing mod. And another thing I added in this housing mod is the windows and doors are random, so you get these kind of random dormer windows and different windows as well. Okay, so that's the new housing district that's growing up near my manor. The manor itself is not really any bigger than it was before, although I have added, as you'll see here, I've added a steward. So I was able to promote to commoner, and if you're not familiar with my balancing mod, commoners require, they require a drink which has to come from the tavern, not from a well. They require, of course, an upgraded house. They also require secondary food, so vegetables, bread, boar, fish, poultry, rabbit, as well as meat is another food that can be added here. So they basically require any food from the entire list of foods plus a higher quality food, which is essentially a meat, vegetable, or bread. They also require goods, which is no problem. I'm producing plenty of pottery. And they require entertainment, which I finally finished after importing lots of cloth. Imported, or finally built my fortune teller. So there's the fortune teller working away in their tent. And it looks like I have a theft over here. So from a security perspective, everything was fine. But then as I expanded over here, I cut down all these trees and I built my first hop farm. And I forgot to send patrols into this area, so this area is unsecured. So I'm going to need to increase security in that area, but that's no problem. Over here, I've been clearing trees on the hill to expand my farming district, so there'll be room for more vegetable farms in this area. And I also, using the authority generated by my steward, was able to buy this huge territory up here on the hill, which is destined to be a lumber producing area. And also this amazingly shaped and massive territory which goes over the hill. So this is going to allow me to build my first monastery and or castle up on the top of this hill. Still not interested in mining, not thinking probably that that's super important at the moment, so I'm not gonna do mining just yet. Other people who have different styles will do the mining early on. I obviously have access already to some gold and probably, I think, yeah, I have prospected an iron node over here, but that's going to require a lot of wood, and I'd rather first get my second estate up and running. So you can see that I've expanded my church. So what was originally called Chapel of St. Muffin has been renamed Chapel of Our Savior, and I basically created a second chapel. I added some towers, and that's got my splendor up in clergy, and as soon as I can get that splendor rating above 5, that'll allow me to start unlocking some of the stuff in clergy, which will then allow me to expand that estate. Because I added my housing mod, some of the randomly spawning houses are now also different. So these surf houses here, there's a log house, there's a kind of a yellow whitewashed house here, another log house. These are all part of my mod, and those will all spawn automatically. Let's see, some other houses from the mod. This one is from the mod, so this is a high-density surf house with room for 6 people. And yeah, here's another one here, high-density surf house. You can see I have a couple different styles, but they all blend in really well with the vanilla houses, which are also still going to randomly spawn. So I'm really happy with that housing mod. I think that it will add a bit of variety to the villages, and also it allows me to more finely control the density of the main streets. So my plan will be, as I increase my population, this will all densify here. And I've added some terrain from the terrain mod here so that I can expand my market area and make this main market a little bit more interesting. But I do plan on keeping this industrial area at the bottom and keeping this market open so that all the people in the market have a vista out, a view out to the lake, which I like. But I do plan on adding more row houses here, probably replacing the rustic church with a finer church at some point. My beer industry is going well. I just changed the balancing for realism mod to add a second brewer because I've always felt in my previous playthroughs that the brewery was just way too slow. One of the reasons why they're so slow is because they have so many inputs. You can see here they have 3 different inputs. And there's a problem with the workers where they'll go gather one input and sit there and not work the rest of their cycle. And so that's really reducing the efficiency of the brewery. So I added in my balancing mod a second brewer, which I'm hoping will increase my beer production. Probably I'll need to expand my wheat production as well, and maybe I can start to put some wheat farms up here on the hill. But I'm very happy with how the town is looking. It's starting to become more of a town and less of a village, which is nice. From a food perspective, as I look at, I think we're coming out of winter now. We had loads of food over the winter. We never really ran out of any fish. We had lots of eggs. So the berries did run out, but vegetables ran out a little bit, I think. But because of my thriving fish industry and because this lake is so plentiful, I was able to keep the food stocks in stock all winter long, even with the additional demands of the commoners. So that's encouraging. Another thing I've been doing, because I was able to upgrade my trade route, so if we look here at Northbury, I've upgraded to level 2, which means I'm selling a lot more, 3 times as much with each trade. And that's allowing me to sell a lot more pottery. And so that gave me a lot of cash, which I used then to unlock the other 2 trade routes. So this one allows me to sell fish. It's still at level 1, so there's not a lot of fish being sold, but it's something. And it also allowed me to unlock lots of things. So in the common path, I've gone up to flourishing, and I was able to unlock the tooling, which means that I can produce coal, which means I'm converting my fuel carts into coal. So if I look here, I've added a couple more fuel carts, which are selling coal instead of wood, and coal sells twice as much. So basically 1 unit of wood equals 1 unit of fuel, but 1 unit of coal equals 2 units of fuel. So that's a much more efficient way of selling fuel. So as soon as you can, you should upgrade your fuel industry to using coal and charcoal instead of wood. I also, besides upgrading the church, I added a pagan worship stone circle here for those out here that may not believe in Christianity just yet. You can see my wood supply is very low, and I've continued to struggle with wood supply because I was relying on wood being harvested in the village itself, but I'm starting to remedy that with my first wood industry here, and perhaps I can add more of that on that hillside. I just want to be careful not to expand the population of this area too much. I don't want to have to create a whole nother village center on this hill. I want it to be more of an area that can leverage the services that I've already built. So this is Twisted River at 148 population in month 25. I think it's looking fabulous, and I'm looking forward to the next few hours of playtime. We'll check in just a bit. Okay, I'm back. I am now in month 32. I have 193 villagers, and I've been busy the last few hours building my first monastery. So this is my monastery slash convent. What I did is I bought the territory for the hillside. There was 2 different territories that I had to buy, so I basically own this entire hillside now. I placed some terrain mod rocks to create more of a flat space here, and for the support industries like the market and the transporters, I built some small surf huts here using the house expansion set. I also discovered along the way that I had a bug that was crashing my game based on that mod, so I fixed that. And I also fixed the fact that serfs were living in my commoner houses here. So those are now only commoners living there, and then I built some more surf huts along the water. So I have my support people living here. I have a small well along there. I have my little market carts here, a rubbish collector, and I've also placed some market benches for people to relax. These little benches here are part of the huts, surf huts, so they're cheap benches. They don't provide any splendor, but they do provide a place for people to sit. Then I built the chapel first, so I built the chapel first, then I built the dormitories for the nuns, and then I started to expand. So I have this here, which is the guardhouse, and the guardhouse is necessary to improve security up on this hillside. I didn't want to have non-nuns guarding the convent, so the nuns themselves are the guards. I built a small well, and then I started to expand some industries. Now I want these nuns up here because it's such a beautiful hillside and it's very peaceful. I wanted it to be mostly agricultural in nature, so I built some rabbit hutches here, some rabbit pillow mounds from the monastic life mod. So the nuns gather grass, they cut the grass and then feed the rabbits and then sell the rabbits. And those rabbits are being sold in the market down in town. I started to build a dairy industry. So this is the barn that the nuns are using to milk the cows. And then eventually I'll have a cheesemaker down in the valley once I have enough milk put together. I also started building, although they're not built yet, some vegetable plots here. So I want these nuns to be basically engaged in agriculture, feeding the people in the village while I increase the density of the town itself. I also increased the number of woodcutters here, so this hillside is now being fully utilized for wood. And actually, I solved my wood problem. So if I look here, I have loads of wood now, which is good. I also added another stone cutters camp, so I have lots of stone because I was using so much stone to build the monastery. And I've managed to unlock lots of things. So in clergy, I managed to unlock all the way up to renown, which is great. I have lots of different industries that I can use, and I've also unlocked the privileges that reduce the splendor impact or the rating impact of the two estates. In the common path, I've unlocked various things here. Mostly, I think I started to build some barns, which was something I wanted to do because I didn't want to keep relying on the small granaries. So for example, you can see I've built a barn here. Alongside this surf house, there's a barn next to it. I'm right in the middle of kind of autumn fall at the moment, I think, with this game. I'm expanding my market, but basically I feel like I have lots of food. There's no issues with food or any kind of resource. And I think the key to that is that I've expanded very slowly and I've focused on food production. I've made sure that before I promoted anybody, I had plenty of food. Made sure that before I got to the winter, I had more barns built to store things. And I'm also making sure that my nuns are focused on agriculture, which will also improve my food security. With the next monastery that I build, which I'm planning on building over here, will be for monks. And that one I plan to focus more on other things like manuscripts, which can be used to promote and also produce authority. I am at the point where I can't expand my territory anymore because I've used all the authority that I had. And as you expand, I'm sure I've explained this, but as you expand your territory, there's an authority maintenance cost. So you need to continually increase the production of authority as you expand. But as you can see, I already own this huge forested hillside, which will be great for another monastery. And I already own another large section of this hillside here, which would be good for perhaps a castle for my first soldiers. So I kind of have to decide exactly what I'm going to build next. But before I expand my territory again, I'm going to need to increase my authority, which shouldn't be a problem. Once I'm starting to promote monks and nuns, I'll be able to get a prior eventually, and I'll start to add authority functions in the monasteries themselves. So I'm very pleased with how things are going. I've had really no issues. I think this game has been a lot easier than normal because of the size of the territories. I haven't had to focus as much on promoting commoners and getting authority put together. So that's been nice. The map also is just gorgeous. I love this hillside with the convent on top. I love the terrain mod. These new rocks that I've added really make it easy to create a kind of flat structured area for hillsides, which I really enjoy. And I'm really enjoying my new housing mod. These little huts are really fun. And I just love the look of my market square. I mean, it's still, still a pretty small town, but I just really like the look of how these houses came out. So I'm going to play for a few more hours, get up into the 200s, maybe up to 300 population, and we'll see what it looks like then. So it's month 39, and my population is 224. I had an absolutely brutal winter. After bragging that I had plenty of food going into the last winter, I didn't, and ran completely out probably for at least a month, maybe even more. I had a very cold spring, and then suddenly it warmed up. It's 20 degrees now, so things are flying along again, but I think I lost maybe 30 villagers over the course of that winter, maybe more. I was constantly immigrating new villagers to try to replace and shuffle, and I moved a lot of transporters out of their jobs so that they could go into critical industries like markets. But yeah, it was a tough winter. I didn't really run out of anything else except food, but I definitely hit rock bottom with food. Even with the addition of the monastery on the hill, I don't have enough food stocks to stay afloat. So I've started to trade for more food, and hopefully that'll help for the next winter. Some other things that I've done since then, I've expanded the monastery a bit. I added a sheep industry, so the nuns are producing wool and they finished their gardens, so they have their own vegetables now. That sheep industry is producing wool, which I'm using down in the valley for my first weaver and my tailor's hut. I have a creamery, which is using the milk from the nuns to churn butter, and that butter is being sold in the market. So if I go into look at my main village market, I have a lot of stalls in here. Every type of food that I'm producing is being sold in this main market, as well as clothes and pottery, and I have 3 different fuel carts. So I'm trying to get ahead of the food situation. I am going to need to expand, though, before the next winter. And I'm not really sure where that's going to happen because I'm basically out of room in the valley as far as cleared land. I may need to expand a little bit in this direction. I do have a few services here at this market, so I might get away with having a few farms here. But as I get further and further out from my service centers and the markets and the churches, it's going to be tougher and tougher for me to have high efficiency in those farms. I may also expand the convent, although the problem with doing that is that the nuns don't produce any gold. In fact, they're costing me a lot of gold. You can see they cost me 210 gold every month, which is not ideal. That said, I'm pretty happy with how the convent has turned out. It's quite beautiful. I have a hospitium here for visitors. I haven't really had to expand my service area here, which is good. I don't want to have too many non-nuns living on this hill. I was spending a lot of time the last day or two in doing some mod updates, and one update that I made was I used to have for my cider press, so I have an orchard up here. This is the orchard mod. It produces apples from each tree. I used to have this donkey-powered cider press, and it was the ugliest thing I have ever made. I think I made it a long time ago. Wasn't too happy with it, so instead I replaced it with a cider mill. So this is a wind-powered mill that crushes the apples and turns them to cider. So I've got beer in one of my service counters and cider being sold in the other. And that'll just make sure that I don't run out of drinks for my commoners because I have been promoting. So I have 15 commoners now. I promoted my first sisters as well from novice. So I'm starting to get into those higher statuses, and the higher status villagers will demand drinks. So I need to make sure that they have plenty of those. In terms of entertainment, I'm still fine. I think with only 15 commoners, I think 1 tent is plenty in terms of entertainment. Yeah, other than that, lots of work to update my mods. I did add some chickens here and there. I added some security up on this hill because I was starting to get some theft from this house, which is now upgraded to a large surf house. I added a wheat farm in here. Again, you saw the orchard already. Probably added a fisher's hut or 2. Oh, I also added a tax collector because I was noticing that some of the houses at the edge of the village weren't getting collected before they hit their max uncollected revenue. So I added another tax collector in that stone tower there. But other than that, no major changes to the manor, which is looking a little bit dated now that the village has grown into a small town. So I definitely need to invest some in the manor. But before I do that, I want to start working on a fort. And I've already begun construction, so I have the main tower built up here, and I'm going to add some areas for soldiers up here, and of course I'm going to need a market up here as well because it's really far away from my main town. So this is going to be the first fortification. I plan to expand it into a castle, a proper stone castle at some point using the security mod pieces, but for now, just a small fort so that I can get those soldiers going, and most importantly, I can get my rating for the kingdom up above 0. This is being hampered by the fact that I have a really high rating in the other 2 estates. And my goal would be that all 3 estates are in a good position so that I can unlock everything and move forward. So that's just a quick check-in. After a really bad winter, I lost a lot of population, regained a bit over time, so I only have about 30 or 40 more than the last time I checked in. But the plan now would be to focus on that castle and to make sure that my food production is in a much better place so that next winter is not a disaster.